It's our fourth time recording this. We're giving out grades to Ty France and Mike Ford and talking about what the Mariners should do at DH coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnett for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's LOCKDON to get started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. And this episode, like I said, has been recorded at least 4 times now. We've made it through the first segment at least once. Colby, I've said this prompt and asked you the same question about 3 or 4 times now, but we're going to do it again on the show today. We're going to continue handing out grades to the 2023 Mariners. Yesterday we did Cal Raleigh and Tom Murphy. Today we're going to look at Ty France and Mike Ford. We're also going to talk about the DH spot in general, what should the Mariners do there in 2024. But first, Colby, I know you already know what's coming, but this is the first time anyone who's watching this has seen it. So we're going to talk about Ty France. We're going to hand out a grade to Ty France. I think most people, know how we feel about Ty France's season in 2023. I think most people that are tuning into this, most Mariners fans in general, feel very similarly about the year that France just had. We're going to go over the offensive numbers here for France in 2023. He was not good, not very good whatsoever. 250, 337, 366. That's his triple slash line. That's batting average, on base percentage, slugging percentage in that order. 104 WRC plus. That's kind of the all-encompassing offensive stat. Just a 0.5 WAR from FanGraphs. 12 home runs, 58 RBI, 17.6% K rate, 6.5% walk rate. Got hit by a lot of pitches. 34 hit by pitches for Ty France, which is a career high by far. Yeah, you got to give a grade to this guy. I know you've already given it like 3 times over the course of this, 15 or 20 minutes of us recording this. But yeah, how did you feel about France's season?
Yeah, he gets a D, and that might be a little generous there. He was the Spider-Man 3 of offensive players this year, just painfully below average, not even mediocre, really. And it's 104 WRC plus in theory is pretty good, but when you consider how much of that is driven by his on base percentage and how much of his on base percentage is driven by hit by pitch,
right,
it's not the most sustainable thing, and it's also not the most impactful thing. And when you factor in also that he plays first base, which is a position where you traditionally need to produce at well above league average rates to be an everyday player, he failed. Like there's just really no question about it. And the worst part is that like we all had to sit there and watch it. It wasn't one of those things where, he's hitting the ball hard. It's just hitting it right at guys. It's not like he struggled with injuries like he did in the past. No, he just stunk. He stayed healthy all year for the first time in his career. So that's a plus. He played solid defense, which is a nice bonus, but it can't carry your entire value. Not at first base anyways. So he wasn't good. We saw him chase more than we ever seen, and we saw some bad chases. It at times looked like France had determined before the pitch was thrown whether or not he was going to swing the bat. It was bad. It was ugly. It looked like he was guessing instead of reacting. Like it was bad. Strikeouts while the overall number is still fine, we saw France strike out more than we have in the past and with more ugly at bats. He missed cookies down the middle of the plate. He expanded the zone more and more like egregiously than he has in the past. He didn't make good swing decisions. There was no
Yeah.
power. Forget the 12 home runs. He slugged what you say 366.
366.
That's terrible.
That's horrific.
You would expect that from like a glove only second baseman,
Yep.
not a first baseman. So no power, pretty decent average, pretty decent on base. But that again, the on base is driven almost exclusively by, well, not almost exclusively, but pretty heavily by hit by pitches, which, not a skill. And a 250 average is totally fine. It's above league average, or it's about at league average this year. But when they're all singles and you're a first baseman who can't run, like who cares what your average is if you're not putting it over the fence or into the gaps? So yeah, France was awful. I can't, I think I'm being pretty nice by giving him a D. And again, that's just because his batting average and on base were technically above league average, but barely. And also, again, on base driven by hit by pitches. That's not a skill. That's not a valuable thing. So, yeah, he gets a D, and I honestly feel like I'm being generous because I think you could tell me he gets an F, and I would be like, yeah, I totally agree. So,
yeah, the only thing keeping me from giving him an F, because I'm gonna give him a D as well, is that I mean, he didn't post Colton Wong numbers, but this was
such a high bar to clear.
Yeah, right. This was really bad though. And to put his poor slugging percentage into perspective here, 2009 Brendan Ryan had a higher slugging percentage than 2023 Ty France. Uniesky Betancourt had multiple seasons with a higher slugging percentage than 366. So that's how bad Ty France was. That's not at all what you want out of a first baseman. You can get away with a 366 slugging percentage at other positions, but not first base. Not first base whatsoever. And I don't care in the slightest about first base defense. I don't care how good he was or how bad he was or whatever. I don't care about that at first base. I need offensive output. I need power output, most preferably. And France provided neither, really. He wasn't able to, he didn't display. Look, Ty France has to be a smart hitter at the plate. He has to make intelligent swing decisions. He has to have a concise approach because he lacks in other areas like bat speed, which I think is one of the reasons that he's going to Driveline this offseason, is to hopefully improve his bat speed like JP Crawford did last offseason. But he's never going to have elite bat speed, even if he does make improvements on that front. So he has to have a solid game plan whenever he steps to the plate. And it looks like he just completely lost that this season, which is not normal for him, right? Ty France has in the past been a very intelligent hitter, but this year it just seemed, especially once things really started to snowball for him, it just seemed like he was trying to hit his way out of it, and it was making things worse. And like you said, it just looked like he was guessing, and Ty France is not the type of hitter that can just guess on pitches. He can't. He cannot get away with that. What really makes this disappointing though, and I think you mentioned this, I don't know, we've done this segment like 3 times today, so I don't know if you mentioned it in this recording or the other one, but he got off to a really good start. The first couple of weeks of the season, he was slashing 339, 423, 500. That's a 164 WRC plus. He obviously had the game-winning 3-run home run against the Guardians on opening night. It looked like, all right, after the injuries and everything that happened in 2022 and how poor his second half of 2022 went, it looked like, all right, Ty France is back. Great. This is awesome. Like the top of the order, Ty France is here. We got that guy. And then it just all fell apart. And he was just never really able to get back there. I mean, there were a couple of glimpses here and there, just a couple of week stretches or like a 1 week stretch where he was pretty good, pretty efficient, was able to help them out offensively. But overall, we're now at basically a year and a half where we have data that mostly says that Ty France is a below average hitting first baseman. Like WRC plus will say otherwise, but Well, WRC plus is like the all-encompassing offensive stat. It's also not perfect. And it's not all WRC plus totals are created equal.
It's not adjusted by position, so
yeah. It's it was a bad year for Ty France across the board. The Mariners have to do better there. I think they are going to try and run it back with him. I can wrap my head around them thinking like, yeah, he might bounce back. That's totally fine because we've seen what a good Ty France can be and what a good Ty France can do for this lineup. But they need to protect themselves. They absolutely need to protect themselves this offseason in case he does or he's unable to take that step forward. Because again, we have about a year and a half worth of data here that says that he's this guy rather than the Ty France that we saw once he shortly after he came over from San Diego. The Mariners overall at first base this year had the 16th highest or most WRC plus at first base. They were 23rd, however, in F4 at first base position. That's just not good enough. That's not good enough if you're a team that's contending for a division and a World Series and all that stuff. If that's your goal. So yeah, again, they have to do better there, or at least they have to protect themselves in case France is not ultimately the answer there. We're going to talk about Mike Ford, who also shared some time over at first base, mostly DH for the Mariners, and saved the Mariners from a historically bad DH situation in 2023. We're going to go over his season, give him a grade in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. October baseball is back, folks, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKDON, to create your new account. And you can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a win, predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Colby, we are now in uncharted waters. This is the furthest we've gotten in this recording. So we're on to new stuff. We're on to stuff that is new to us. Fingers crossed that it stays that way. It's been a while since we've experienced technical difficulties, but for most of our listeners here, you know that Locked On Mariners is synonymous with technical issues. So we were due, to say the least. All right. So Mike Ford, he signed a minor league deal with the Mariners last off season. He's been with the organization like 4 times. He was someone that we talked about like, hey, yeah, we might see Mike Ford for like a week or 2 or something like that. And, he eventually got called up and he was able to stick for the rest of the year. Had a great start to the year down in Tacoma. Was able to make his way onto the roster, especially with, the issues that the Mariners were having with Tommy La Stella and Cooper Hummel. None of that worked out. None of those things worked out. Dylan Moore was obviously, still rehabbing from injury, etc. Ford ended up slashing 228, 323, 475. That's a 123 WRC plus. He was worth 0.6 F4, 16 home runs, a couple of those being big time home runs for the Mariners, 34 RBI, 32.3% strikeout rate. That's not good at all. 9.6% walk rate, however. Considering that like he signed a minor league deal, you're not really expecting anything of that. I feel like you kind of have to give him an A because he was actually able to contribute and he was, at times one of the bigger parts of this offense, which probably says more about this offense than Mike Ford, but like he helped in some pretty big ways at times this year. So I think I have to give Mike Ford an A.
Nobody gets an A this year. They missed the playoffs except for one person, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
We already gave Cal Raleigh an A-.
That's not an A. Yeah. So Mike Ford does not get an A because he missed the playoffs like everybody else.
Sure.
But I mean, is it relative to expectation? Then like, yeah, A- because, he was a minor league free agent. Nobody cared. Is it relative to how he actually performed? Then it's probably a B. You know, he did have some strikeout issues. He did have long stretches where he was pretty unusable. He also had stretches where he was you're the guy you kind of wanted up in a big spot. So we'll always have the 4th of July game.
Yep.
But yeah, Ford was pretty darn good, pretty important. You kind of caught lightning in a bottle. Do they want to try and run it back? We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a second. But yeah, Ford was solid. He was exactly what you needed when you needed him to be. And then, unfortunately, you didn't do a very good job of making him replaceable. And in fact, you got so little production from other places in the lineup that he was essential to be in your lineup pretty much every day. So again, that says more about the Mariners than it does Mike Ford, but Ford was really solid. He's a solid addition. Provided you with exactly what you needed. So yeah, B plus, maybe A minus. So yeah, he was a really solid player, and I hope they don't need him next year, but we'll see what their plan is.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But yeah, the Mariners DH situation was a disaster to start the year. Again, it was mostly Cooper Hummel and Tommy LaStella filling out that role for about the first month of the season. We all know how that went.
Can't believe that didn't work.
Yeah. The Mariners ended up finishing with a 92 WRC plus from their DH spot, which was, let me sort here real quick. It was 23rd in Major League Baseball, and their DH F4 was negative 0.1, which is 22nd in Major League Baseball. And that's a significant improvement from where they were, because Ford, I mean, we just listed the numbers. Ford was pretty good, and yet they were still unable to finish with a positive F4 at the DH spot. And Ford was up for the majority of the year too. I think it was from end of May till the end of the season.
Yep.
And yeah, again, they were not able to finish with a league average WRC plus or a positive F4 from their DH spot, which should put things into perspective how bad that spot was for this team to start the year. But Ford was a blessing at the end of the day, and yeah, unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, ended up being one of the Mariners' 5 best hitters this year. Which again probably says more about the Mariners offense than Mike Ford himself. But props to Ford for coming up and being a big piece of this thing, and helping the Mariners in a spot that was just an utter disaster for them. Speaking of which, we're going to be talking about that spot a little bit more here in terms of what it's going to look like in 2024. Are they going to rotate guys through that spot? Are they going to run it back with Mike Ford? Are they going to go out and get a full-time DH? We'll talk about all that in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Jace Medical. Modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains are fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign travel may cut you off from the treatment you need. Jace Medical is your solution for that. Just fill out our online form, and one of our board-certified physicians will review it to determine whether medications are safe and appropriate. Then they will send your prescriptions to one of our partner pharmacies, where your Jace order will be filled and mailed directly to your home. Everyone should feel empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So as we just went over, the Mariners DH situation in 2023 was abysmal until Mike Ford arrived. And even, he at times had some struggles. He had some stretches where he was not particularly good, but overall was able to keep the Mariners mostly afloat in that respect. But do the Mariners want to do something different at that spot? We know that they and most teams in Major League Baseball prefer to rotate multiple guys through the DH. They like to keep that spot open so they can use it to give guys a rest that usually play in the field or what have you, right? Unless you have a Yordan Alvarez or a JD Martinez or someone like that, you're rotating multiple guys through the DH. So do we think that the Mariners are going to try and go that route again? They tried to do that last year with Tommy La Stella and Cooper Hummel, which no, thank you. Not again. No, never again. No, just don't even think about it. Or do we think they're going to run with a full-time DH, whether that be Mike Ford, who's due or is projected to make $1.5 million in arbitration this winter, or do we think they're going to go outside the organization? Obviously, Shohei Ohtani would be the biggest answer here, but let's live in reality here. Do we think that they might go after another full-time DH, maybe someone like JD Martinez, someone else like Jorge Soler? I know you really like him. What do you think they're going to do this offseason?
Jorge Soler is the answer. He's better than Ohtani. That's right. I said it.
All right.
No, so the Mariners have really not shown any interest whatsoever in having a full-time DH, even when it's kind of been in their interest. Remember how often they ran Domingo Santana out there in right field in 2019, and how quick they were to ditch Daniel Vogelbach and all that stuff. Like they haven't really been interested in running with a full-time DH, since Nelson Cruz left, which, I get. Remember Dipoto inherited Nelson Cruz, and you're not going to not start that guy every day. So I would imagine it's something like that. But at the end of the day, you cannot have the production you had last year from that spot again. Can't have it. So what do I think they're going to do? I think they would really like their first and second options would be, we have the extra outfielder for the day. He is DHing. Which is kind of what they wanted to do last year with Pollock, and then Pollock just sucked, and so, I think that is what they would prefer to do, but they can't just ignore full-time DH only types, like they have in the past. If Jorge Soler is the best bat you can get, you sign Jorge Soler and you put him out in left field 15 times a year when you have to, and you just ride the offense, right? If the best you could get is JD Martinez, that's the best bat you can get, then you put JD Martinez in the DH spot and you ride it out. Like, you have to get production from that spot. Ideally, you get it with somebody who can play, a position. It's not a full-time DH. But at the end of the day, you can't just be like, well, we care so much about leaving that DH spot open that like our primary DH entering the year is going to be, a 100 WRC plus guy. Even that. And while that would be an upgrade over Tommy La Stella and Cooper Hummel in that plan, it's still not a good plan. It doesn't make it okay. You need excess production from that DH spot. So can it be some combination of Kelnick and Canzone, and a good veteran? Sure, it can. Could it be some combination of, an infielder who, can also play third and first and do all that? Yes, you can do that still. Could be, but if the best you could do is Jock Peterson, and you don't want Peterson playing in the field, fine, I get it, but you don't really have a choice. You have to get offensive production from that spot, period. End of story. How you do it ultimately should be secondary. Right. You have to have production from your DH spot. You have to have production from first base. You have to have production from third base. The Mariners got production from 0 of those spots this year. That cannot be the case next year. And if that means the best you can do is, well, I don't want to give Jorge Soler 3 years and $50 million because he's just a DH, but I really believe in the bat. I guess you just suck it up and you live with it. And you figure it out from there. And I don't know, hand Soler first base glove a little bit. I don't know what to tell you, but you have to get production, and your production can't be like, well, we hope this 38-year-old coming off of injury is just going to be good again.
Yeah.
It can't be that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jerry Dipoto got on the show, told us like Tommy La Stella is coming off of 2 Achilles injuries, but we believe in him. Like, after 3 bad years and 2 Achilles injuries, and then we get told about the elbow thing and whatever. Now I'm just ranting about Tommy La Stella, and Tommy La Stella is catching strays on the show. But here's where I stand on the DH. I also prefer to just leave that spot open and rotate guys through that, that's the ideal situation. But if you don't have enough depth where it makes sense to do that, where your options there are, Tommy LaStella and Cooper Hummel and AJ Pollock, then you just don't do that. You go out and get yourself a full-time DH. I said this last year during the off season when it was shaping up to look how it ended up looking. Like, you're not deep enough to utilize that strategy. So if the Mariners are not Sam Haggerty was getting DH reps towards the end of the season.
He started half the games at DH down the stretch. There in the last 10 games with your season on the line. Sam Haggerty was the DH.
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
What are we
can't
doing?
do that. So at that point, you explore Jorge Soler and you explore JD Martinez and you explore all these guys.
Do it right away anyways, but
sure. I mean, yeah, just build your roster that way then. Like, whatever, just jump the gun on it and just, like, if you don't think that you're going to go out and get, 3 new starters that are going to push the rest of the guys down into more, bench roles or utility roles or whatever, or you're going to go out and spend, some money on improving your bench in general, then just go out and just jump the gun immediately and just do it. Just go get JD Martinez or go get Jorge Soler, go trade for a guy that is primarily a DH.
Yeah. The one thing you absolutely cannot do is what the Mariners did last year. And that is when the music stopped, they were without a chair. Yeah. They didn't die for the last chair. They waited. The market will come to us. The market will come to us. And it never did. And that's how you end up with Tommy LaStella and Cooper Hummel as your primary DH in a year in which you thought you could win the World Series. You can't do that. So that means you have to jump the gun a little bit. And, maybe this is the last guy on the market. And, I think he's only worth $12 million. Like, after this, we're getting into the, AJ Pollock range. Like, I'll give him 14 and I'll secure that bat. Like, you can't be left without a chair again. Like, it's critically important. The Mariners need offensive production from first, third, and DH this year. You can't just bring back those 3 guys who failed last year and be like, well, this year they'll be better. Yeah. You can't do that. So you have to have somebody there. Like, you can't be left standing at the altar. You need production from this spot. And if that means that you have to, early on in the process, look at the market and go like, I think our best bet to get production out of the spot is just to go with a full-time DH type, then you do it.
Yeah. I mean, hell, if you bring back Teo, let Teo be more of the full-time DH. I mean, you can play him in the field sometimes, but like, ideally you don't want him playing in the play, like in the outfield in the playoffs, or
Jock Peterson, but sure.
I mean, just don't be afraid to do that. Right. That's the point of saying this, especially if you're not going to build the depth that is necessary to have, the ability to rotate guys through the DH. Because there really is a very obvious situation where it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all to do that, like last year. So if you find yourself in that spot, or you just think that you're going to end up in that spot, if you just foresee that's probably going to be the case, and Dylan Moore and Sam Haggerty might still factor into the roster. God, I hope not. But like, if that, if that's where you think that you're going to end up, then just jump the gun and just go get the bat. At the end of the day, you need bats. This is what you said last week when we talked about the biggest needs for this team is, I mean, they have positions that they do need to fill, but at the end of the day, they just need bats. They need offensive production. So just go get the best bats you possibly can get this winter.
So you need, basically the DH should be an excess bat, a guy who's an everyday player that you don't quite know where to put him, in the 8 positions out on the field. So you go, okay, well, today I'll put him here and then I'll move that guy to DH. And then, but like, it doesn't really matter what the guy's primary position is. Like if Mitch Garver is like the best bat you can get, then you just get Mitch Garver and he's your backup catcher / first base / DH. Yeah. The Rangers have done it. Yep. Like, you just roll with that. And that doesn't
Rangers have 3 catchers on their roster.
Right. And that doesn't mean you can't just sign Tom Murphy to be the backup too. Fine. It doesn't matter what position that guy plays.
Yeah. The Rangers have Jonah Heim, they have Austin Hedges, and they have Mitch Garver. And like where they are right now, like, it's fine. You can make it work.
You can carry, especially because this year the Mariners clearly don't want to carry 13 position players. Very clearly they don't. They don't use that last guy ever on their bench. They never use him. So why do you care if that guy's a catcher if he can hit? Like, why do you care about carrying 2 catchers on the bench if all 3 can hit a little bit? Which, if you went Garver, Murphy, and Raleigh, they can all hit. So you can rotate them through in DH and play first base and all that stuff. So
Well, and generally speaking too, and this goes back to our conversation that we had yesterday about Gino Suarez and how much he played and how much Ty Francis played and how much Teo played this past year. Like, you need to build better depth so you're not forcing those guys. Because look, obviously I do blame Scott Service on that, but I also don't blame him in the sense that, like, yeah, the guys that he did force to play so much probably gave him the best chance to win on most nights. So, like, there weren't really better options on the bench either.
Yeah, like, why would you criticize a guy for not being so super, like, oh, I've got to go use Tommy LaStella. Like, it's hard to
Yeah.
blame him when that's his other option. When it's Dylan Moore versus Tommy LaStella, or when it's Sam Haggerty versus, pick whatever bum they called up from AAA for the day. Like, you're going to go with the better player. So it just it didn't work. Like, and again, and I think we even said this last year, Tommy LaStella was most certainly not plan A for the DH or plan B or plan C. But they got caught. They got caught, trying to get cute. They got caught trying to wait for the price to get exactly where they want it to. And they were like, oh, we can't have a full-time DH. So we're not even going to consider JD Martinez or anybody like that. And they got caught. And it bit them, it bit them, where. And it's a big part of the reason why they're watching the playoffs right now instead of participating in them. So
no,
they can't do it again.
LaStella definitely wasn't plan A. Brandon Belt was one of the plans before that. We know that. I think he's even outright said that it was down to Toronto and Seattle. Not sure about that, but I think I heard something about that.
Belt would be interesting.
But I'd been told about Brandon Belt last offseason. I had heard that, from people in Toronto as well. And I think that's probably someone that they look at again, even though that he ran some pretty high strikeout rates again this year. But
boy, did he.
Yeah. But he had a lot of success as well in Toronto this year, and he's in the free agent market again. Yeah, he can play some first base as well. So that not only covers your bases on the DH front, but it also covers your bases in case Ty France takes a step back, like we talked about earlier in this show. So I would keep an eye on Brandon Belt. We know how much that Jerry and Justin love to circle back on guys that they've targeted in the past, and Brandon Belt was apparently someone that they did have their sights on last offseason. So
just go get Jorge Soler. He's awesome.
Sure. I'm totally down with that.
That's not what you said.
I mean, he does feel like one of those high variance right-handed power bats, that do tend to struggle when they get to Seattle. But
interesting. Hey, how many balls did Jorge Soler slice through the Marine layer when they came to Seattle? Oh, like 3? Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
I'm not necessarily worried about the Marine layer. I'm worried
it's fine.
about the high strikeout rate.
Righties can't hit in T-Mobile. That's a myth that's been proven. Yep.
Right.
Never mind Nelson Cruz. Like, ignore him.
Right.
Righties can't, or Mitch Haniger. Not him either.
Right.
But not Gino last year. But all the other righties, they can't hit at T-Mobile Park.
Gino in 2023.
Gino in 2022.
Gino in 2022 was pretty good.
Gino in 2022, that offensive profile with Gino's glove from 2023 is like a 4.5, 5-1 player.
Oh yeah.
So, like,
that's an all-star. Yeah.
Whatever. No, Julio Rodriguez can't hit at T-Mobile Park. Whatever. Right-handed bat. You should probably trade him for Lars Nootbaar. Right. He's a lefty. He'll hit better because of the ballpark. Yeah.
Right. That's exactly what I said. Yeah.
Totally a thing. Yep. We're in agreement.
Sure. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby Patnhead. I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez. It's DANEGNZLZ. And Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Yeah, Tom Murphy didn't hit at T-Mobile Park either this year.
Let it go.
No.